Okay, well, welcome everyone to, this is episode 3 of the virtual Fit Foodie Roadshow, where I am interviewing industry experts about all these different areas of holistic health, trying to make your Quarantimes at home a little less achy and bloaty and all of those things that people are stressy, all those things, right?
Right.
Today I have with me Craig Fitzpatrick, who is a dear friend of mine from when I lived in Portland.
Yeah.
Actually, Craig is the like main rehab, right? Like you're kind of the main rehab specialist at
Specialist, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I want to give a quick shout out before I introduce Craig to Hosmer Chiropractic, because that clinic, those clinics, now it's multiple.
Yeah,
Pearl District and Multnomah Village, which makes me so happy because my dad lives in Multnomah Village. So I get to see, not Craig, unfortunately, but I get to see the other chiropractors there.
Right.
But they're an amazing set of clinics, and they the thing that makes them so special is the rehab, honestly. And yeah, it's huge. It's huge because, and I know that a lot of times doctors will give patients rehab exercises to do, and then they don't do them. So to be able to just send them in the back and say, go see Craig, and have an actual personal trainer there that's helping you to do the things properly, at least you're doing it that one time, maybe if you're not doing it at home, right? So
Right.
yeah, amazing. So everyone, Craig is apparently, I'm going to ask you more about this. So
sure. Yeah, ask away.
Sent me here, but Craig was in a near fatal car accident. So not only understands the frustration and fear that comes with an injury, but the importance of being listened to and cared for in recovery. You are a very good listener. Being able to help someone get out of pain and accomplish things that they never thought they would be able to do is the greatest part of his job. As a personal trainer for over 20 years, Craig has worked with and helped everyone from young athletes to seniors, to those with severe cardiac and musculoskeletal injuries, paraplegics, and those recovering from brain traumas. And he's completed many certifications and courses, including exercise coach and lifestyle coach with Czech Institute, which is, of course, corrective holistic exercise kinesiology. Love those guys. Gray Cook's functional movement screen, both advanced and general populations. He's a certified personal trainer with the National Academy of Sports Medicine, NASM, and many more. So basically all of your certifications are corrective exercise.
Yeah, I would say right? So.
And functional. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about so was your accident after you were already a trainer?
No, I was, it happened when I was 14 and literally running across the street, got into the middle turn lane, and there was cars going, to my left, cars, and I'm in that neutral zone where cars are going either way. Yeah. And I remember a voice inside my head saying, you should really go back. You should go back. This isn't safe. Yeah. And again, being 14, I was like, no, that'll look stupid. Right. And I remember this giant Chevy Econoline van goes by, and it was one of those vans. Is so big, it has the semi-truck mirrors that stick out. Yeah. And so I was thinking, I've got to go as soon as this van goes by. So the van goes by, and that mirror just almost, hits me in the face. Right. And I just darted. And the next thing I know, I am jumping in the air to try to leap towards the curb. Everything goes black, but I can hear metal bend, I can hear the screech of tires, I can hear glass break. If you've ever skinned your knee, that noise. Yeah. So I get hit, and then they think I got flung about 30 feet, and then they think I skidded for about 30 more because it was on a hill. Oh so there's no reason I should be here. There's that because they think the car was going between 30 and 35 miles per hour, which the impact alone of the car should have been game over. And then you get catapulted down the hill, right? In the street. So I was very fortunate, not that I got hit by a car, but if you're going to get hit by a car going that fast, I was fortunate that the only thing I had, other than every muscle in my body just felt like mashed potatoes, but I had a hairline fracture in my left femur, thigh bone, that didn't show up initially on x-rays. And again, this was in Omaha, Nebraska. So, you know, you're going to like physical therapy afterwards. And the guy that was the physical therapist, I remember, he looked like he was a sneeze away from a massive heart attack. His face was as ham, and he had like this like kind of blonde mustache and like this like sandy blonde hair. So he just looked like a big plate of like ham and sauerkraut. And he sounded like Chris Farley, like man down by the river. Like he was just like, come on, if you don't move it, you're going to lose it, son. If you don't move it, I'm going to paint a giant daisy on the side of your face and call you Daisy Mace. Come on. It wasn't until like a few weeks later, then when they're doing like a follow-up x-ray, that they did see that like there had been a break. And I was like, oh, well, that's why you were limping. You weren't some sissy boy. You were, but anyway, rushed, I had a kind of a rush PT, and then was just kind of let go because he's like, I was 14, you know, my body was able to repair itself. Yeah. And what ended up happening, and this is, you know, a couple of years later, is when I was 21, my back just exploded, just completely went out, had a disc herniation. And a lot of people, and who knows for sure, but a lot of people, what finally happened is everyone was trying to treat my back. So I get massages, I get, you know, some kind of PT, but that would only help for maybe like an hour or so, and then the pain would come back, because what was happening is, because of that break that I had from that car accident, I was kind of doing this weird hip hike every time I took a step. So I was a runner, I was weightlifting, I was swimming, I was doing all these crazy things.
Crooked.
And my body was, you know, completely compensating. So, so luckily I found there was a thing called the Egoscue method of health through motion. And that kind of set me, it's a book by Pete Egoscue. If you don't have it, I highly recommend Pete Egoscue. He is amazing. And his whole idea was the site of pain is rarely ever the cause of pain. And that kind of set me on the correct path for that. Yeah, and through that, then I went to the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And through that, there was one person that kept on getting stated in there, or not stated, but referenced, was a guy named Paul Chek.
Yeah.
And then I fell headlong into the Paul Chek thing. And that was what really, I mean, all these things, each one just kind of helped kick open the door and gave me a little bit more clarity on why would this cause this pain? Yeah. What fixes it, and so on and so forth. And so unfortunately, there's nothing like being in the trenches yourself. You know, I wasn't, after, when I was 21, when my back went out, I went for 4 years, so I couldn't run. I couldn't do a push-up without my back going into spasm. I was chewing, you know, ibuprofen and Aleve like they were Tic Tacs, you know, just to kind of get through the day and stuff like that. So once I was finally, you know, it was with the Egoscue that I remember after doing that for like 2 days, I all of a sudden didn't need pain medicine for like the first time in years. And then it was just, oh my gosh, there's hope. Like I was looking at having like major back surgery by the time I was 26. Wow. And luckily I was able to avoid it. And I'm stronger now at 42 than I ever was in my 20s or
I love that.
In high school or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And also just like, I didn't know that part of your story. So like, there's that phrase that's like, my favorite people are the people who've like been through hell and come out carrying buckets, you know, like the fact that like
right.
that tragic experience and your own like suffering into like this career that makes such a huge difference for people. It's like, oh yeah, no wonder, like I think you're my people, you know? Yeah. So good. So, you know, a lot of what we were talking about when we were talking about doing this interview was about just like the different physical positions that people are putting their bodies in. And a lot of people are not so much in the US that I've seen, but a lot of people in other countries are not even allowed to leave their house right now. I was talking to someone in New Zealand yesterday. My friend's in Spain and Italy. Like you have to have a paper that says I'm going to the pharmacy to get my prescription, you know? And my one friend was like, I should have got a dog because that's the only way I would have been able to go outside and walk. You know, people are getting fined for taking their preschoolers out of the house, for God's sake. So, you know, one of the things that you and I were talking about was our glutes are going to die. You know, from sitting and not walking. I mean, walking is
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah.
Walking upright is one of the things that makes us human, right? From an evolutionary
Absolutely.
perspective, I think glutes and fire are the two things that make us human, you know? And
Right.
walking is like other animals that don't walk upright don't have the musculature in the glutes that we do, right? And it's because
Yes.
we walk and it's because we stand upright. So if all we're doing is sitting and laying on the couch and Netflixing and like in these positions, we're
Yeah.
going to be throwing, right? We're going to have back pain, we're going to have neck pain, we're going to have shoulder pain. And a lot of that isn't because of our back. It's not, it's like you said with the Egoscue method, which I will put in the show notes because that's huge. Egoscue is the OG corrective exercise. I mean, it's just powerful.
Yeah.
It's like a cross between corrective exercise and physical therapy, right? It's like somewhere in between, but yeah, really the that idea that the pain that you're feeling is not from the area that you're feeling the pain in is huge. And
very often,
so you are going to show us today some exercises that people can do at home to help relieve some of that pain, turn on the glutes, right?
Yeah.
Things moving and get our kind of our alignment back into like that happy evolutionary upright primate mode. Yeah.
Right. You got it. You got it. Exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, I mean, you're the boss. Go for it. Like, just show us what you got. And I'll ask some questions. And I feel like some of the things that we were talking about, I might have some clarifying questions, but I'm actually going to mute right now because my kitten is destroying a cardboard box in the background. How loud it is. So I'm going to let you talk and I'll just jump in if I have questions.
Perfect. That sounds like a plan. So yeah, the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to jump back here. I don't know if you guys can see, but I have the coolest exercise mat ever. This is a collage of David Bowie on like a whole bunch of different images. So David Bowie's going to help us out here. So the first one we're going to do, this is just called a like a bridge, simple glute bridge. Very simple, but can be very effective. And what we want to do is we want to start with our legs about hip width apart over here, and our feet pointing straight forward. We don't want our feet turned out. We don't necessarily want our feet turned in. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to tighten my stomach. I always tell people, imagine someone was going to drop like a weight on your stomach. I'm going to tighten my stomach here, and I'm going to squeeze my glutes. Like I've got a $10,000 bill between my cheeks and someone's trying to take it from me. So I'm going to squeeze my butt really tight even before I begin the motion. I'm going to put my arms out to the side here. And what this is going to do is it's going to help to also stretch some of the tight muscles in our chest and our front shoulders. And everyone in the Brothers Cow has tight shoulders and tight chest. So, you know, just a little bit of stretch here. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm squeezing with my glutes, keeping my stomach tight, and I'm coming up. And as I do this, I want a fairly straight line from the base of my chest here down through my knees. I don't want a hyper-exaggerated arch in my lower back, so I don't want an over-exaggerated arch here. I want to kind of keep that neutral. I'm going to hold for 5 seconds at the top, and I'm going to slowly lower for 5 seconds here. And as I lower, I want to try to keep my glutes squeezed and activated. A lot of times what people will do is they'll be really good about getting the squeeze up here at the top, and then as they lower, they're just kind of collapsing down. And we don't want to do that. The glutes are so important for stabilizing the hips. So that contraction at the top, that long hold of 5 seconds, and that 5-second slow deceleration, that's helping to train the glutes. And the glutes are basically your cheeks, your butt muscles, to stabilize the pelvis. So again, when the glutes get shut down, whether it's from sitting for too long or there's incorrect movement patterns that we have, the lower back tries to take over, and so does the hamstrings. So sometimes when people do this, they'll do this, and a lot of people sometimes will say they feel like it's a lower back exercise, almost like it's pinching their lower back. And that's usually synonymous with their glutes not being turned on. If that's happening to you, what I would suggest is, again, that same idea, try to tighten the glutes before you start, embrace the stomach, and think about almost gently curling your hips off the ground, almost like you're peeling your butt and your lower back off the ground like that. What that will do is that will create a stretch reflex. So it's going to relax that overactive low back, and it's going to help to get the glutes really turned on here. Same thing, I might not be coming up that high. If this is an issue for me, that's okay. Come up as high as I can, get that good squeeze, and then I'm going to slowly lower for 5 seconds. When I come down, whether I'm doing that full bridge or just doing kind of that hip tuck here, when I lower, I never want my butt to completely touch the ground and completely relax. We're going to try to keep the glutes activated and turned on for a longer duration with this exercise. What that does, the reason we do that is that helps to train the endurance of the glute activation. We don't want our glutes to be something that just kind of turns on quickly and then shuts off. Ideally, when you're doing this exercise, we want to be able to work up to sets of 2 or 3 while doing this, with reps between like 10 and 20. So these sets, one set can last more than 2 minutes. We want it to, again, be low intensity, long duration. Again, we're trying to retrain those glutes to activate and stay activated. That long duration, low intensity is what's going to do that. If we were to do something that was incredibly challenging, where you could only do maybe like, 1 to 7 or 1 to 8 reps, that would help strengthen the glutes, but it may not necessarily help them to stay on and activated for a longer period. Also, the higher the intensity level of the exercise, the more likely it is that there's going to be compensatory muscles that will engage. So for example, if I were to use like some kind of like physio band across my waist, so in fact I can do that here. This is a really powerful band, but just for example, if I were to put this tractor gauge thing, and try to do like a hip raise like that, that's going to be a lot of activation, but that could perhaps cause my hamstrings to overengage or my lower back to overengage, especially if my glutes aren't firing. So when we do this exercise, you really want to make sure, I tell people when you do this, it should be your glutes by far should be the #1 active muscle here. I'd say it usually should be about 90% your butt, and it might be like 5 or 10% your hamstring, 5 or 10% your lower back. It's impossible for your hamstrings and your lower back to be completely turned off, but this should be by far and away the most powerful muscle, and this is what should feel like it's working as you're doing that.
Okay, great. I have a couple of questions whenever you're ready.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I noticed that your feet are kind of far away from your butt. So in yoga,
yes.
right? I happen to be wearing a yoga shirt today, which is totally funny. But in yoga, they will cue, and how I learned to teach bridge pose, different than what you're doing, is that you're touching your heels, right?
Yes. So like your hands are even like back like this, and you're almost like touching.
Do you think that just hyperextends the low back too much to do it that way? Is it?
That's a great question. It may, and that's another thing, is like everyone's body lengths are going to be different. My femur might be longer than yours, or we might have the same thigh length, but you might have a shorter torso. So different lengths of our anatomy are going to create different levers. And so for pure glute activation, it's just going to kind of vary from person to person, and also depending on the activity we do. I work with a lot of times with people that are distance runners, and distance runners tend to have really overactive hamstrings because, we were talking a little bit earlier about trying to get more glute endurance. That being said, the glutes are never going to have the same endurance as some of our hamstring muscles. So if I was, I'm sorry? Yeah, they're small, but also we have what's called our phasic and tonic muscles. And so without getting too technical, there's muscles in our body that react really well to intense, powerful activities. So in the glute max in particular being one of them. Like they're really good for like a heavy squat, a heavy deadlift. But if I keep doing a lot of them, other muscles, their activity level is going to slowly diminish, and then it's going to kind of get a little bit more into the hamstrings if the load gets too high. But so that is to say, so this exercise I think is a great one. Like, you know, like kind of like doing like the bridges here. It's going to create more of a stretch through here. And there are going to be some people that respond really well to that, that activity to get their glutes activated, and especially if their rectus femoris, like some of these thigh muscles in their front hips, are really tight. You're going to need to stretch those in order for your glutes to activate. Mm-hmm. But there will be other people that if they already have short, tight, and overactive hamstrings, I get them back like this. They're just going to, it's going to feel like an eagle's just like squeezing the back of their legs, just like talons in the back of their thigh. So that's why I say for each person, this is where I generally start for me, where it feels like I get the best glute activation. I have worked with people, you know, that have to have their like legs out like this.
Oh, wow.
In order to do more glute, you know, and again, it's depending on your limb length, if you're a weightlifter, if you're more of an endurance athlete. And sometimes I'll even have to have people get a little bit of wider stance or closer stance together. There's a lot of different ways to do it. The only thing, and I'm fine with it anyway, especially if we're trying to get the glutes activated. Mm-hmm. So if we have a person that's having trouble getting their glutes activated, and, you know, say for example, you know, they're doing this exercise and their hamstrings are just taking over, what I'll have them do is I'll have them do maybe for 2 or 3 weeks, we'll do some high rep, long duration exercises where we really get the glutes activated, get them strong, and we'll reprogram the body to know when I'm doing a hip extension like this needs to be turned on more so, and this is in a distant second place. And after that, now we can come back here, get those heels a little closer behind, and try and see if that has helped to reprogram that exercise. And a lot of times it will, but sometimes we have to just make the launch pad the easiest path for that activation to happen.
Right.
If that makes sense, yeah. So I would never ever say that there is any like bad exercise, but it might not be the right exercise for a particular person, for the particular, you know, build, or depending on their activities. Mm-hmm. So it's just trying to customize the exercise to the individual and their activities. And then it gets difficult because it's like, am I allowing the person to compensate, and or is it that this exercise isn't necessarily the right one for them, or is it, you know, that's kind of the mystery that you sometimes have to go through, is how much is a support exercise for you, or is it that you have other compensating issues that we have to address, knock those out, and then get you to the point where you can do that activity without it causing a bad effect or negative effect.
Right. Yeah, and I think the overarching takeaway is like you want to feel it in your glutes, not your hamstrings, not your lower back. So wherever your feet need to be, whether they're closer, further away, or wider, or whatever, just making sure that you're feeling it in your glutes. And then tell us the rep range one more time, because this is really interesting, especially for people who are used to doing strength training, right? Bodybuilding, powerlifting, endurance work, all of these different types. And this is what I learned from NASM actually, when I was a trainer, was all of those different types of exercises or activities or goals have a particular rep range that you want to focus on. So for powerlifting, I'm, you know, up in the 3 to 5 rep range because I'm trying to get strong. You know, like that's my goal. And so I want, you know, stronger muscles, bones, tendons, but I have to work up to that, obviously. But for like hypertrophy, you would be more in like an 8 to 10 rep range if I'm trying to get big muscles, which also makes you feel stronger, right? It's not the same as powerlifting or dynamic strength, but then we're talking about turning on a muscle that maybe isn't working properly and trying to balance because you talked about the difference between like the hip flexors in the front of the body and the glutes, and needing those muscles to have the correct relationship to each other. I can stretch my hip flexors all day, but if my glutes won't ever turn on,
exactly,
what am I doing? So so you mentioned a bigger rep range, and I wanted to really emphasize that for people for that neuromuscular engagement. And what would you say?
Exactly. So I would say, again, with a very slow tempo. So, you know, again, if you think of the tempo, the concentric or the initial would be like, I can come up for 1 to 2 seconds, a hold for about 5 seconds, and then lowering for about 5 seconds too. And again, the whole time, I want you just connecting with the glutes here and keeping the glutes engaged throughout. I don't want the glutes to relax at the bottom. I don't want everything to be shut off. I want that just like I'm keeping like my hands, and sometimes this helps too. I tell people, just like you clench your fist, you're just clenching your cheeks, right? So I'm not getting to the bottom and, you know, let my cheek go, you know, limp. I'm coming up. I'm going to hold for 5. I'm going to slowly lower. And then as soon as my butt touches the floor, I'm coming right back up. And again, rep ranges, I would say between like 10 and 20.
Okay.
It's a long rep range. But you bring up another point too, is I don't want people to think if I do bridges, I can only do bridges from 10 to 20 reps with a long duration. Absolutely. Once your glutes are engaged and largely charged, there's a guy named Brett Contreras who's called the glute guy.
Oh, yeah.
He does, I don't know if you're familiar with it. I mean, he actually has a bench like this that he's designed that hinges, and he can put, you know, 600 pounds on this pad. He does these like really explosive, powerful, you know, hip thrusts, and he does it with NFL football players, and especially people who have had a back injury, so maybe they can't take the axial load of like a squat or a deadlift.
Right.
You know, or come to him, and they are, you know, it might take them 2-3 months for that back to heal, and they're able to lift loads almost at near maximal level when they're done. And they're not, you know, just doing like pulling and then slowly lowering. I mean, they're, you know, moving small.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely different. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's a more explosive, powerful, like movement. But again, you would want to work up to that. You want to make sure the muscles are firing properly first, right? So that's where we're starting today.
Yes, exactly. So that's why we're starting with this today. So, and again, don't be afraid to kind of explore foot position. The one thing I would say with that exploring foot position, we do want to make sure that our feet are symmetrical. I don't want something like, you know, where one person has to have like a foot out like that. That's just going to further solidify like a bad movement pattern. So, you know, try to keep the body symmetrical is what I would say with these exercises.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And obviously your head and neck are pretty relaxed. You're not looking up at your knees. You're keeping your head on the floor, right?
Yeah.
It seems from where I'm sitting, but just to say it for people, like you don't need to look. Just get your mind-body connection. You want to feel it. Yeah.
Right.
Train your neck in the glute bridge.
Yeah. And that also brings up another point too, is one thing that's really nice about this exercise is people that sometimes have like that forward head posture when they've been on the computer for a lot. This is actually letting the head and the neck and the shoulders realign into a neutral position like this while you're doing this. And so this can also be, although it's wonderful to retrain the glutes, give the back some relief, you know, challenge the stomach a little bit, it's also doing a lot of good for the neck and the upper shoulders, because we're keeping that in that neutral position. But like you said, we don't want, you know, like someone driving their chin back into the floor or anything crazy like that. If you're doing that, that's probably the level of the exercise is too much, you know, draw it back. So look for compensation too. If you find like you're straining the neck like that, that's a sign that you're probably doing it too hard or doing too much.
Nice. Love it. Okay, so glute bridge, 10 to 20 reps, 5 seconds, hold. Don't relax your glutes as soon as you hit the floor, come right back up. Perfect.
Keep us good. Yeah.
What else you got for us?
All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to switch the camera and hopefully this doesn't explode or drop it.
That worked.
Let's see here. All right, I'm just going to get that. Yep.
So jealous of home gyms right now.
I'm just going to, my gosh, putting you guys in a cyclone here. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to use, for again, you don't have to use this. This will work really well if you have like a dowel rod. A broomstick works really well if you have that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this rod here, and we're going to be doing just a simple hip hinge exercise. Let's see if I make sure I'm not going to smash into one of the chin-up bars. And what I'm going to do here is I've got this it's just a bamboo stick for me, but I've got a stick touching the back of my head, the area between my shoulder blades, and right here at my sacrum, just kind of like your belt line. And what we want to do here is I want to make sure that I have enough room where I can just barely get my fingers between the dowel rod and my back. I don't want a huge space where I can get my whole hand through, but I don't want my back flat where I can't get anything through. Just enough to maybe get like 3 fingers through. I don't know if you can see that here with the shirt.
Yep.
And what I'm going to do is it's just kind of like a deadlift pattern or a hip hinge. So when I do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to keep my shins are going to stay perfectly vertical throughout the exercise. They are not going to move. However, I am going to be bending my knees. So what's happening is I'm pushing my butt back like this, and I'm bending my knees, and I'm going to try to bend over as much as I can while keeping that neutral position in my spine, like that, and then I'm going to come up, and as I come up, I am squeezing my glutes as hard as I can. So I'm going to come down like this, and I'm making sure that my head's not coming off the stick, my shoulders aren't rolling off. I'm keeping those 3 points of contact, the back of my head, the area between my shoulder blades and at my sacrum, hinging forward like that. And I'm going to try to keep the pressure on the middle of my foot, but notice my knees are not rocking forward. I'm coming back as far as I can go, and then squeezing up like this. And so again with this, I always want to make sure that my glutes, or excuse me, my stomach is braced. I always think like if a boxing kangaroo was going to come by and like give me a cheap shot right in the gut, I'd be braced for it. And again, my glutes are just turned on the whole time. And again, for glute activation and stability, I want to, my gosh, I keep hitting that. I want to make sure that I'm doing it nice and slow. So think about a 4 or 5 second hinge. And you may not be able to bend over that far. That's fine. I don't want any pain at the back for this. But what this is going to do, what I like about it so much is it's really going to stretch the tight hamstrings. It's going to put a little bit of a stretch into the glutes also, but it's also strengthening them at the same time and strengthening them in concert with each other. So, and again, if you don't have this, if you don't have a stick, what works really well too is if you can literally pinch the skin of your lower back. And if I start to round, that skin is going to leave my lower back. So that gives me a little bit of a pretty good indication as I come down. For me, right about here, I can feel the skin wanting to start to loose or come out from my fingers and then coming up like that. I like the dowel rod a little bit better because sometimes what people will do is they'll come up and they will hyperextend at the top and then bend, you know, at the bottom. And we want to try to keep that spine neutral throughout the exercise. One of the things that happens with like a hinge exercise like this or a squat is the demand on the back is different at the top than it is at the bottom. A lot of times when we're doing something like a deadlift, what happens is the back wants to round and then again kind of come up and hyperextend. And we want to try to keep that spine neutral throughout the motion. We don't want it to bend. And basically, most of the injuries that happen at the back is when the back is starting to kind of rock back and forth. That's when it kind of wears out the disc a little bit. So if you can keep that, the spine stable, and the back muscles, the musculature and the structure of the back likes to be fairly neutral. The hips love to bend. They love to bend over and extend. And that's where we're so powerful. The glutes are some of the most powerful muscles in the body. And if we can really challenge those, we're great. If you look at the greatest athletes, they all have a lot of junk in their trunk. And there's, and they tend to have longer careers also. There was a football player named Adam Archuleta who worked, I think he was for the LA Rams. He was amazing. He had hamstrings. It's like, it looked like his glutes just went straight down his back. He was incredibly powerful, but he had a lot of injuries. And unfortunately, I think that his career could have been a lot longer. But one of the things he talked about too is he just did these incredible, it was really intense hamstring training, so he kind of overrode the glute training, kind of went more for hamstring training. And I'm not saying that hamstrings aren't important, they are vital, especially for heavy lifting. But I think anytime the glutes take a second place to hamstrings, you're not working at your fullest potential, or you're going to be more prone to injury. But I train my hamstring. I'm very, very hard on my hamstrings, but I always want to make sure that my glutes are taking most of the beating when I do the exercise.
Makes sense. So that seems like something that you could, I mean, whether we're using them or not, I think most of us do have a broom in the house somewhere.
Broom sticks work great. Yeah,
you could just unscrew even the thing and use the stick.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You probably want to be next to a full-length mirror so that you can see your shins.
That helps so much. The other thing you can do that works really well is if you do it in front of a couch, and if you're doing it here, and you just keep your calves in contact with the couch the whole time. So you have a little bit of that feedback. So as I'm doing this, if my calves start to lean away from the couch, I know I'm breaking, I'm compensating. So you have a little bit of that feedback to keep that right there.
The couch is behind you, so touching the back of your
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. So in fact, if I pull this out, I don't know if this will, but the idea, like if I'm here and I'm doing it, I'm going to keep my calves, touching here. So as I come up, my calves aren't moving, but it helps to give that feedback, because a lot of times when people do this, they really do want to kind of bend forward like that.
For sure.
But for this, to kind of isolate the glutes and get a good stretch in the hamstrings. And again, if you've been sitting a lot, which most of us have, because if you're fortunate enough to work at home, you're usually going to be on your laptop, on a couch, on a desk if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that just like being in this 90-degree angle for a long time. And if you walked around the whole day like this for 8 hours, you can imagine how horrible or how tight that would be to extend your arm.
Oh yeah, or even if like I fell asleep and my hand was like this the other night, and I woke up and I was like, oh my God. Yeah, it was like a sex arm for, the first half hour I was awake. I was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
Same thing is happening to our legs, right? When we're sitting at our desks or on the couch.
For that long. Yeah, it's just getting so tight. Yeah, so the one thing also to consider is like when a muscle gets tight, it can hurt, but also that's going to impede a lot of the circulation to your legs, to your toes, to your feet. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of bad things that happen when the muscle gets overly tight. You really want to make sure. In the hamstrings, too, are some of those muscles that they just love to turn on. They're like the kid in the back of the room that's just like, pick me, all the time, right? And so also you put them in a short position for a long time, they're in seventh heaven. I mean, they're just like no, I won't let go. You can't make me. They want to squeeze and strangle as much as they can. So we gotta like coax them out of that, get them loose and long. Yeah.
Right. So for the hip hinge, same kind of rep range, or would you do a little less, or?
I would probably try to do it for the same amount of rep range, and then just be mindful too, especially we don't want compensation with this, especially as the back bends over more. We want to make sure that it's not uncomfortable in the back. The one thing too that is great about this is oftentimes our leg muscles will become more powerful than our back muscles. And when that happens, especially with runners, and we see this a lot at the clinic, you've got people that are running that are so powerful that as they run, you know, as they come through in this you know, the flexion part of the gait, it can round their back, and then as they explode off, they're kind of like, you know, running back and forth like this, and that back is going to get irritated, especially if you're a distance runner. You know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of strides where your back is getting pulled into extension and flexion and extension like that. So again, we don't want you running like a robot where there's no, you know, like movement happening at the spine. But the more we can train the back to be the control center and these muscles to lengthen and extend without pulling the hips into extreme positions, the better we're going to feel, the better we're going to perform, and the longer we're going to be able to do our activities. So with this, again, it's training those hamstrings and those glutes to give without letting the back compensate. So the back has to know, I have to keep this amount of rigidity at the top. I have to prevent myself from going into a hyperextension. And then at the bottom, I have to prevent myself from going into hyperflexion. I have to hold that neutral position. And again, it's just going to improve your athletic performance and reduce injury.
Nice. Nice. So basically, if you see in the mirror or you feel that you start compensating, don't push it to the right number of reps. Just like listen to your body is basically what you're saying.
And again, some people might only be able, initially, you might have a movement pattern, especially if you've been sitting for a long time, you might only be able to get maybe like 30 degrees without feeling like your back compensates. And in that case, I only want you to go as far forward as you can while maintaining that perfect alignment of the spine. The dowel rut should begin at the sacrum, between the shoulder blades, and the back of the head. Nice. And so if I'm going here and all of a sudden my head's coming off, my back is rounding, we're only going to go, perfect practice makes perfect. So we're just going to hold to that position. And over time, as you start to program that body to realize, oh, okay, this isn't going to move, I've got to get the flexibility out of here instead of here, then you're going to be able to go a lot further over.
And it happens pretty quick too, right? I mean, it could be like the next day, you could be going 35 to 40 and so.
Yeah, it's amazing how when the body knows what it's, it really will respond quickly to its ideal or the way it's meant to move. Mm-hmm. The problem is someone must explain it to me that it takes 300 to 500 reps to learn something to the point of autonomy where you don't have to think about it. So if you've ever worked with dumbbells, the first time you're doing it, your arms are all going all over the place. So it takes, roughly 300 to 500 times to get to a point where you're not like, ugh. It can take 3,000 to 5,000 reps to learn something, to relearn something that you learned incorrectly. So sometimes for some people,
this explains my entire personal training career. Oh my God.
Right. It's just, it's so true. Wow. It's like, and if anyone has ever learned dance choreography, and then you have to change it just a little bit, it's so hard because you've got that muscle memory where the body wants to go there. I think Paul Chek one time explained it. He said, if you think about movement patterns, it's like you have an elephant in your brain, and the elephant has worn this path to the watering hole, okay? And if that's the wrong path, you're trying to get that elephant to go to a better path, but the elephant has to knock down trees and go through all these over these hills. It doesn't want to. So the harder you make it, the elephant's finally going to say, the hell with this, and it's just going to go back to what it knows. Yeah. And that's why, again, we want long duration, low intensity, because if it gets too intense, if we're start to do this, I'm like, okay, bro, we're going to put 500 pounds on the bar, we're going to rip 20 reps. The brain is going to go, okay, whatever, and it's going to try to get that bar up or that movement pattern the only way it knows how. because the load is too hard for it to reprogram itself while doing that. So that's why we keep the intensity down. And by intensity, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Like you do like 15 or 20 reps of like glute bridges, and your butt is like cackling with fire. It's just, I mean, it's just like, so it'll believe me, it'll be plenty of a workout. And that being said, if you feel like you can only do 7, it's not like, well, I've got to do 10 to 20 or otherwise I'm not going to stabilize. No. If you do 7 and like your back's starting to hurt or your hamstrings are starting to cramp, stop. The goal is to get to eventually to 10 to 20, but don't feel like you have to start to 20. If you can do 3 reps and then that's it, then that's it. Next time you do it, try to do 4. You'll get there. But yeah, don't force it, because again, you're just reinforcing bad habits. Yeah.
Totally. And we're all home now. None of the bros in the gym can see you doing a glute bridge with no weight. You know what I mean? So like, just a really good time to get the ego out of the equation.
That's right.
You know, and like just into your body and just get that mind muscle connection. Yeah, it's like a really good time for that.
Exactly. And so when you do go back to the gym, you can be like, rah, I'm going to total up 500 pounds. I've been doing the glute bridges. But yeah, you'll totally get your 500-pound deadlift. No problem.
Exactly.
Maybe not. But yeah.
So good. I love it. All right. Well, was there anything else for glutes? Or I know you were going to talk about something else too. Now I can't remember what it was. So.
Sure. Yeah. So another one that's really good, and I'd say this one is very important, but it's very difficult. And this is probably one of the exercises I see done most often incorrectly.
Oh, good.
And so what it's going to be is, again, we're going to use that dowel rod if we can. Like a bird dog exercise. Oftentimes what will happen is you will see someone on all fours. And actually, I'm going to flip this around.
Oh, here we go. Going on a roller coaster.
Here we go. All do. All right. There you go. Let's see here if that, I'm still in, I think this will work.
Yep.
I'm going to use this dowel rod here. So just like we were using this for the hip hinge or that deadlift pattern, what happens oftentimes is when people do this, I'll see people doing a bird dog where they're extending and then they get this huge gap right here. You drive like a F-150 pickup here, and then they come back, then they round, and they extend. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this dowel rod here to keep us honest.
Wow.
And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to do this just with the legs so you can see that my back is not moving. So can you see my fingers through here at all?
Here, let me see if I can spotlight your video too and make it bigger.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend my leg, but I'm not going to let my back move. And this is where the rubber hits the road for a lot of people. A lot of times their hip flexors are so tight that they do this and they can't get their leg neutral without hyperextending the back. So you'll see some people, when they do this, when they're forced to do this, they can only extend their leg like this because those hip flexors are so tight. So we want to get to that point where the leg is straight back like this, but without that compensation here. And so now if I switch legs like this, the same thing. I don't want any movement at the back. And also, people oftentimes will they can't get full hip extension, which is what this motion is. So they'll turn the leg out.
Right.
You know, what will happen is if you try to do it with the stick on the back, then you've got a lot of compensation, that stick is going to roll off. Mm-hmm. So this can be very frustrating, especially for very powerful athletes. You know, these are the guys, they'll deadlift 500 pounds, but they have back pain and they can't do this simple exercise. They can't get their legs straight without their back going into that hyperextension like that. So this is very, very difficult. And what's frustrating is out of the 3 exercises I've shown you, it's the one that looks like the least amount of activity is happening. It
Oh
just
yeah,
looks so
try to get.
simple. It looks like what, Aunt Karen had to do for her hip replacement, stuff like that. So, but
Yeah.
it is a wonderful exercise to, again, reprogram that body. And again, if the hip flexors are too tight, you can't do that. Another great thing is like using a foam roller, just right here, like your TFL. I can demonstrate that really quick here, but just like.
Yeah, that's a real comfy feeling.
Yeah.
Foam roller on the hip flexors. No,
Right,
but
right.
honestly, trying to get a big guy to do a bird dog exercise in the gym, are you kidding me? It's like, no, they feel humiliated by it, but it really is so, when you can do that with that alignment, it's so powerful. And I've never tried it with well, maybe you made me do it once in rehab, I don't know, but I don't remember ever doing it with a stick, so I'm going to try that later.
Right, but it's a very humbling exercise, but the good news is whatever discipline you have, whether it's dance, martial arts, weightlifting, whatever you do, this will improve it. You're going to be stronger for using this this exercise. It just complements it because it's training the whole body to work synergistically together. And so again, if for my weightlifting guys, myself included, if you're doing a deadlift or a heavy squat, everything from your toes to your eyeballs has to be working correctly together. Otherwise, something's going to deviate and to make the exercise harder, the chance of injury goes up.
Yep.
So again, the more we can train that body to eliminate excessive movements that are going to take away the productivity or the efficiency of the exercise, it's just going to make everything better. So, and I would say if you are doing this part like an exercise program at your home, if you're fortunate enough that you have like a TRX or some dumbbells at home, I would do a lot of these exercises at the end of your workouts because we don't want to over exhaust your core before you do something really challenging, if that makes sense. You might want to do like maybe 1 or 2 light sets just to kind of warm up the glutes and the stomach and stuff like that, but don't try to save this like most of the reps and most of the sets for at the end of a workout.
That's a great point. Yeah, you don't want to go into, like, say you do have a squat rack at home or you're doing deadlifts or something with like actual weight. You don't want to have exhausted glutes going into that. You're going to wreck yourself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
So foam rolling, I feel like I should say, if you're going to foam roll your hip flexors, make sure you don't have anything in your pockets. I've had that. For some reason,
are not your friend.
Guys that I would train in the gym would always have like their keys or something right there, and then they'd find out that they left their keys in their pocket while they were on the foam roller. So that's just like number one protocol: empty your pockets first.
And for like foam rolling, like the hip flexors, what I tell people is if you think about like where you put your hands in your pocket, like this is going to be kind of like that TFL area right through here. That's one of the areas that's going to be, and also it's the top of what's called your rectus femoris, which is this huge, powerful leg muscle. Starts here at the hips and runs down all the way past the knees. And if that gets tight, that's another thing that can inhibit that hip extension. So I'm just going to move this down just to here again.
TFL stands, of course, for tensor fascia latte. Latte?
That's correct.
Latte.
Yes.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Latte, yeah, right? I always want to say like a latte, like at Starbucks or something like that. Yeah, but to do this, there's going to be the iliac crest, which is the top of your hip bone, and then there's going to be your thigh bone. And for most people, if you're wearing jeans, where your pocket connects with the front seam, there's a little like metal boss here. Right around that area is going to be right around your greater trochanter, that thigh bone. We never want to be on the crest of the hip or on the thigh bone. We want to be in this area in between. So when I do this,
found mine. Oh.
Yeah. And you'll know if you roll onto it. I mean, it's pretty tender. The muscle, there'll be a difference between that muscle tenderness and that bone. It'll almost feel more like a pinch or something like that. So we don't want to go onto the bone, but just really get into the meat here. And if I can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently bring my leg, I'm going to bend my hip here. It's going to make it a little bit more tender, but it also softens the muscle so we can cause that release. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go very slowly. I want to think about an inch a second, and I'm just looking for tender spots. And as I find a tender spot, the idea is I want to come onto that tender spot, hold here until that tenderness goes down or reduces by about 30% or more. So what we say oftentimes at the clinic is, when you find a tender spot, give it a number between 0 and 10. 0 being nothing, 10 being, the most horrible thing ever. And so if it's a 6, we want it to go down to at least a 4. If it's a 9, we want it to go down to at least a 6 or lower. And generally, that will take around 20 or 30 seconds. If it is really nasty and it's bound up, it can take longer. But generally, we don't want to stay on anything for too long, especially, we never want to stay on a spot if there's any kind of referral pain. So if I'm here and I'm starting to feel like tingling in my legs, or a burning or any kind of pain, the tenderness should always feel like a hurt so good pressure at where the foam roller is, and it should never have a referral pain up or down the chain like that. And so I'm going to kind of come here, and I can come a little bit higher, a little bit lower, and then I can also kind of roll back onto the side like that. And so that will get kind of help to get some of the hip flexors, and then again kind of coming even further forward, getting the top of that rectus femoris, or even doing like the thighs from the bottom of the knees. Like I can start here and roll up, kind of like flutter kick. So if I find a tender spot here, I'm going to kind of extend and flex like that, again until that pain decreases and come up. And I can come all the way up my hips there too. But those are very powerful muscles that are important, but when they get too tight, they can really inhibit our movement patterns in a bad way.
Got it. And if someone doesn't have a foam roller, I know, there's been was it you I was talking with that there's
Yes.
kettlebell shortage?
Yes.
Weird equipment shortages everywhere. So what could people do? And I mean, because I'm just sitting here and just digging my thumbs into that spot, oh my Lord.
Yeah.
That feels like that hurts so good kind of situation. But we were talking about rolling pins or.
Yeah. You can even use for this area, you could use a soup can. You could use that. I wouldn't want to use that at my low back, or something.
Yeah.
But just the problem is we want something that's firm but is not too hard. So if you were going to use, let's say a soup can, one of the things you could do would be you could take a soup can and then wrap it in a towel. So it's got that firmness, but it's not going to be quite as brutal. Trigger point balls work really well if you have a ball around the house. Generally, we advise against something that's like a tennis ball because that has a lot of give. But it's not going to be cataclysmic, and maybe using that tennis ball initially is exactly what you need. I certainly use the tennis ball, and but again, it depends. There are going to be some times where this is going to be so painful. Oh, the other thing is, even if you do have a foam roller, sometimes doing this on the floor initially is it can be just way too tender. So you can try it leaning against a wall.
Yeah.
Sometimes with people with IT bend or lateral vastus lateralis, the side of your thighs, if that's too tender, you try to do a foam roll, it's so painful the muscle can't relax. If I just sat there and just poked at you or pushed on you, your muscle's eventually going to try to tighten up to protect itself. Mm-hmm. So
that's not helpful. That's not actually going to help do the thing you want it to do if your muscle is grabbing the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, I would find never promise me having out there. Do not use a glass jar. So that could break.
Yeah. That's bad.
Something rolling pins. I've known people that use rolling pins, or
Or like
If,
a hydro flask, one of those metal water bottles.
yes,
would work.
yes, that would be dynamite. A hydro flask would work great.
Yeah.
Those work really well. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
I feel very glad I have a foam roller. I don't have to MacGyver it.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is great. Is there anything else that you feel like is like number one, like something we shouldn't miss or we should definitely talk about before we wrap up today? That's like,
yeah, just quickly in closing, like, you know, because I know a lot of people are just really stressed if they're working. Sometimes it's like the idea of like trying to get on the floor and do something just doesn't seem like it's feasible. If all else fails, what you can do, and again, I'm just gonna put you on a little mind warp trick here. Flip that. Oops, dang it. Here. Now I'm upside down.
No, we're good.
Oh, gosh.
Corrected.
You can just do even squats on a chair. You know what I mean? Like just like
nice.
You do that. Like if I'm just here, like just using this bench. Just that idea of like trying to get about like hip width apart. And I want you to think when you do it, as much as you can, trying to keep the back straight, but push your butt back, push your knees out wide, come down, and then think about squeezing your glutes like that. I mean, just, you know, like, and again, you can use your bench or your chair, whatever you're sitting on. If it's the couch, I can hear it touch my butt, come up, boom, boom, just like that. It's so simple, but if you just did, you know, 5 to 10 of those every 15 minutes, you know, it's not going to, in fact, there's a great book called Get Up, and it's Dr. Levine. I can't remember his first name, but he was one of the first people to talk about how, like, the dangers of sitting, you know, that the sitting can be worse for you than smoking. But he said that people that took frequent movement breaks, and I'm not saying that you're doing a Zumba class, you know, every hour, or, you know, but like just, you know, like a couple reps of here and there, people initially think, I don't have time for this. But in fact, the people that do take movement breaks tend to have, it's something like 15 to 20% higher productivity and better mental clarity than those that like think, oh, I can't do this. I have to buckle down and do this, because the longer we sit, especially in that, you know, collapsed position, if you think about it, for every inch that our head comes forward out of ideal posture, that's the weight again of our head on all of the tiny ligaments and muscles in our neck. So if this is like, you know, ideal posture, and I'm like clumped over like here, say nothing of the pressure I'm doing on all those like ligaments and tendons and nerves, but I'm also reducing the blood supply to my brain.
Right.
Like all the brains and the, you know, the arteries and the that run up to your brain, they're getting compressed. It's hard for that oxygen to get to your brain. So you're only going to lessen your workload and your anxiety if you include small movement patterns throughout the day. You're not going to be taking away from your productivity. So
yeah, and I love that idea. Like, it doesn't have to be an hour-long workout that's like,
no, God, no, yeah.
You don't have to change your clothes, just like literally get up and move around every half hour or hour or something.
Sure.
And I think, you know, that even that kind of like getting up and down from a chair without using your hands, like the number one thing that seniors have trouble with is getting up on their own from a seated position. And like, if we can just make sure that we don't lose that ability, like how much better off are we going to be as we age, right? Like that was the very first thing when I would train seniors, that was like the very first thing that we would work on is like, just can you stand up from a seated position without using your hands? And it was like heartbreaking how difficult that was for some of these little old ladies. And like, oh my God, I don't ever want to get that to that point, you know? So it doesn't take much to keep that, you know, that core strength and that balance and keep your glutes alive. Keep the glutes alive. I think that's going to be like the campaign. Just keep your glutes alive. Eat some vegetables. It's all
What's
gonna
the,
be
there's that song by Queen. I can't remember, but it's
Fat
something.
Bottom Girls.
No, no, it's one of the earliest. It's like keep that hope alive. But anyways, every time you say that, I just keep hearing that Queen song. But like, keep your glutes alive, keep your glutes alive. But anyway, yeah.
Nice. I'll find it. I listen to Queen a lot. I don't know off the top of my head, but Fat Bottom Girls also applies. Come on, let's keep
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, it does.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Craig, for spending time with us today. And I'm sure people are gonna potentially have questions. Will you just send me any way that they can contact you, like whatever the best way is, and we'll do that. And yeah, again, if you're in Portland, you need a chiropractor. Once this all is blown over, Hosmer Chiropractic is thebomb.com, and love those guys. And yeah, just so appreciate your time. And this was super fun. And I'm gonna go unscrew a broom handle now because God knows I'm not keeping with it. So might as well. Right on. All right. Thanks so much.
Of course.
And sign off for today. But again, just appreciate your time so much.
Of course. Glad to help anytime.
Thank you.
You bet.